This is the 6th timeline video of the Apocrypha mini-series, the so-called 400 silent years. Today, we will discuss some attributes and timelines for the story of Tobit, the story of Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. Shalom and Shalom Israel. Hello Christians. What up to everyone else? Welcome to today's discussion of something to think about. It's presented by ThaBruthaz. Today's discussion will be on Apocrypha, chronology, and composition, specifically the books of Tobit, Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. Hashtag Apocrypha Timeline. Administrative. I will go over some administrative details before I get started, like I always do. Setting expectations. I plan on reading virtually everything on my slides and my notes, since some folk can only listen and are unable to watch. I will be following a script. It helps me to stay on point. Reminder, we go a little slower here than other content providers. Okay, this is not a cut session. No smoke and daggers here. Pause if needed. Sources. These are some of the sources we will use in today's discussion. Pause if needed. Here are some more sources we will use in today's discussion. Pause if needed. Here are some additional sources. Pause if needed. Here are several Bibles we will be using and or referencing in today's discussion. Pause if needed. These are the remaining sources we will use and or reference in today's discussion. Note, we do not claim that any image or source that we use and or reference is 100. Pause if needed. Fair use disclaimer. This video is for educational and scholarly purposes only. Pause if needed. Doctrine disclaimer. This video contains our personal opinions and interpretations and is not meant to dictate doctrine. This video does not contain hate speech, nor do we advocate violence of any kind. Pause if needed. Before we get into today's discussion, it's that time once again to give all praises to the Most High. Again, how we do it. Yes, we're a little different.
All praise to the Most High.
All right now. All sing it.
Praise to the Most High.
Go ahead, brother. Come on now.
Praise to the Most High.
All right now.
All praise.
Praise to the Most High.
Praise him.
Come on now.
Come on.
All praises. All praises.
Come on now.
All praises
All right
to the Most High. To the High. Praises.
Come on now. Go ahead, brother.
Praises. All praises. High. Praises. High. To the Most High.
Yahawah.
All right, giving all praises to the Most High. Once again, I couldn't do what I do without the Most High. You couldn't do what you do without the Most High. Okay, let's get started. This is the 7th video of this Apocrypha mini-series, and it is the 6th timeline video. This is the agenda. We will recap the previous 6 videos. We will review historical timelines as reference markers. We will specifically go over the book of Tobit, the book of Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. And then I will give a summary. Recap. Once again, these are the typical books listed in the current Protestant Apocrypha that we presented in episode 36. This is the cover of my copy of the Protestant Apocrypha, okay? This is my copy right here. Okay, not that big, but it's a good size print. That's why I like it. Okay, it has these books in it. 1st and 2nd Esdras, Tobit, Judith, Esther, including additions, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, also Ecclesiasticus, okay, Baruch, including letter to Jeremiah, 3 Holy Children, Susanna, Bel and the Dragon, Prayer of Manasseh, 1 and 2 Maccabees. These are the books that we have already discussed in previous timeline videos, okay? 1 and 2 Esdras, Esther, Baruch, 3 Holy Children, Susanna, Bel and the Dragon, 1 and 2 Mac. These are the books that we will discuss in this timeline video, okay? Tobit and Judith and the Prayer of Manasseh. I will cover the last 2 books of the Apocrypha in an upcoming timeline video, Lord willing. That includes Wisdom and Sirach. I might throw in Psalm 151. This is the first video of this mini-series titled Apocrypha, 400 Silent Years and Non-Canonical Books, episode 36. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed 6 reasons that they use to describe the Apocrypha as silent or non-canonical, and we provided actual sources for each reason. This is the 2nd video of this mini-series and the first timeline video titled Apocrypha Timeline, Books of Ezra, episode 37. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed the various titles of Ezra and did a breakdown of 1 and 2 Esdras from the current Protestant Apocrypha. Okay, main takeaway: 2nd Esdras chapters 1 and 2, 15 and 16 are separate from 2nd Esdras chapters 3 to 14, which is the core work. This is the 3rd video of this mini-series and the 2nd timeline video titled Apocrypha Timeline, Books of Baruch, episode 39. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed how all of the books of Baruch may have been attributed to the scribe Baruch, which was used as a pseudonym, aka pseudonym. Okay, please watch episode 39 for more details. This is the 4th video of this mini-series and the 3rd timeline video titled Apocrypha Timeline, Maccabees, and the Hasmonean Dynasty, episode 40. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed where the name Maccabees originated and gave a detailed overview of all the books attributed to the name Maccabees. And yes, there are more than 2 books attributed to the Maccabees. This is the 5th video of this mini-series and the 4th timeline video titled Apocrypha Timeline, Additions to Daniel, episode 41. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed all these additions: Prayer of Azariah, Song of Three Holy Children, History of Susanna, and Bel and the Dragon. This is the 6th video of this mini-series and the 5th timeline video titled Apocrypha Timeline, Additions to Esther, episode 42. This is the thumbnail.
Check it out.
In this episode, we discussed all these additions: Mordecai's dream, the text of the king's edict authorizing the destruction of the Jews, the prayers of Mordecai and Esther, Esther sees the king unannounced, royal decree reversing the previous edict, and the fulfillment and interpretation of Mordecai's dream. Apocrypha Timeline, Historical Setting. Where do the Protestant Apocrypha stories occur within the canonical Israelite writings? We will start once again by quickly reviewing the historical timelines we presented in the previous timeline videos. Okay, I am repeating the previous historical setting timelines for those who may not have watched the previous timeline videos. This is the temple timeline from the video Israelite Writings, Various Temples to Find, episode 15. So on this we have simple things like when Solomon built a temple, 959 BC. Up here, his temple was destroyed, 586 BC. The second temple completed right here after a 14-year delay, 515 BC. And of course, the second temple was destroyed, 70 AD. I will be using this timeline as a reference. You can pause at any time if needed. This is the Israelite captivity and/or dynasty timeline from the video Israelite Writings, Laws Important, episode 12. I want to use these dynasties as a reference in addition to the temple reference markers. So we have here the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Hasmonean, and Roman dynasties listed on the screen. Okay, these are approximate timelines. Also, the Roman dynasty did not end in 135. Okay, this just coincides with the Third Jewish-Roman War, for the discussion we had in episode 12. Again, pause if needed. I will now rearrange the temple timeline to make room for the dynasties. Now we need to make additional room, so we can add the Protestant Apocrypha historical setting timeline. This orange time bar shows the approximate date range of most of the historical settings within the current Protestant Apocrypha of today, except for Psalm 151 and possibly chapters 1 and 2, 15 and 16 of 2nd Esdras, which we discussed in a previous video on the books of Ezra. Again, we will be using the Bible Hub timeline throughout this Apocrypha mini-series for almost all of the historical settings, since they fall within the Bible Hub timeline. We are not saying that the Bible Hub timeline is 100. We are just using it as a reference. Okay, again, this time bar shows the approximate date range of most of the historical settings within the current Protestant Apocrypha. Regarding Psalm 151, this is for those that believe Psalm 151 belongs within the Israelite writings or the Apocrypha. Psalm 151 is a story about King David when he was young. about 200 years to the left of this timeline. So you can see over here, Psalm 151, historical setting is approximately 1024 BC. Wait for me a sec here. I gotta open my notes up. Sorry about that. Okay, also, chapters 1 and 2 and 15 and 16 of 2nd Esdras may have been a reflection of current events post 70 AD to the right of this timeline, and that depends on who you believe. Okay, the historical setting, according to some sources, claim this as the setting for these 4 chapters. Okay, you see this, chapters 1 and 2, 15 and 16 of 2nd Esdras. Some claim it is post 70 AD. So you see up here where it says Second Temple destroyed, that's 70 AD. Some people believe those 4 chapters, the historical setting, is after that. Okay, again, we discussed these 4 chapters in a prior timeline video called The Books of Ezra. Apocrypha information. Reminder, for each Apocrypha book discussed in our timeline videos, we will present the following information: description, date text was written, authors, languages, and historical setting. Once again, we will not show the date found if applicable. For example, if and when a scroll was found in a cave, etc. We will not present information on such findings in today's discussion. Purpose. The purpose of these timeline videos is to provide some detailed information on each Apocrypha book to get a historical perspective on what each book is about, and eventually discuss how they fit or do not fit into the canon.
What do you think?
Before we get into today's discussion, we have a few questions. Did King Manasseh of Judah actually recite the Prayer of Manasseh? Do you believe the stories regarding Tobit and Judith are credible? Were the stories of Tobit and Judith, as well as the Prayer of Manasseh, ever considered canon? Please pause this video and put your answers in the comment section below. Once again, I hope you paused the video and provided some answers. We'd definitely like to hear what you think. Okay, let's continue. Tobit, Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. Just like we have done in previous timeline videos, we will start today with a collective overview of where these 3 books are found in some Bibles. Overview. You're not going to find these 3 books, Tobit, Judith, Manasseh, in Protestant Bibles. Okay, they are segregated into the Apocrypha section of some Protestant Bibles. Tobit and Judith. Tobit and Judith is interspersed within the Old Testament books in many Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. Prayer of Manasseh. Hard to find interspersed within any Bible. Ethiopian Orthodox Bible and the Britain Septuagint translation are at least 2 Bibles you will find the Prayer of Manasseh. Okay, in the Ethiopian Bible, the prayer could be in several places. For example, I went on to Amazon and I tried to look at the sample read portions that they provide at the beginning of some of the books, and I saw the prayer listed as the first book in the table of contents. I also saw it listed after 2nd Chronicles. So in 2 of the samples that I can see, I saw that they were in 2 different places. Overview. Tobit and Judith. Okay, they are not included in these common Bibles. King James Version, New International Version, New Living Translation. Okay, they are segregated into the Apocrypha section in these Bibles. Revised Standard Version, Good News Translation, New Revised Standard Version, Updated Edition. They are interspersed within the so-called Old Testament of these Bibles. New American Bible Revised Edition, New Catholic Bible, Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, New Revised Standard Version Anglicized Catholic Edition. Okay? This is not a complete list. Okay? These are just some examples regarding Tobit and Judith. Overview, Prayer of Manasseh. Okay, the prayer not included in these common Bibles. King James Version, New International Version, New Living Translation, Good News Translation. Okay, although the Good News Translation has an Apocrypha section, the prayer is not included in that. The prayer is segregated into the Apocrypha section in these Bibles: Revised Standard Version and New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. It is not interspersed within the so-called Old Testament of these Bibles: New American Bible Revised Edition, New Catholic Bible, Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, New Revised Standard Version Anglicized Catholic Edition. Okay? Again, the prayer is hard to find interspersed within any Bibles. Okay? And this is not a complete list once again. These are just some examples regarding the prayer. I will now show you some examples how these books are not included, segregated, or interspersed within the Old Testament. Okay, bear with me a second here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to take a quick peek at some of these things. And as you can see right here, I'm in the King James Version. Okay, so what you're going to do is click on this book list right here. Oh, let me scroll down. There you go, book list right here. And you can see in this book list, you got the Old Testament, you got the New Testament. And if you look in both these lists, you're not going to find things like Tobit, Judith, and the prayer. And you do not see an Apocrypha section. Okay, it'd be right here if there was one. Okay, close this down. We're going to go to the G&T. Okay, the G&T. Here's the book list. As you can see, it already has Tobit 1 listed. I'm going to go on this book list. We're going to scroll down, and you can see there's an Apocrypha section for the G&T. And in here, you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, Tobit and Judith, but no Prayer of Manasseh. Okay, so that's the G&T. So now we're in the RSV. Okay, as you can see, I already got Tobit 1 listed here. Click on the book list. We're going to scroll down, and as you can see, there's an Apocrypha section. And this Apocrypha section has 18 books in it. Okay, 18 books. As you can see right here, it has Tobit, Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. So this segregated portion of the Bible called the Apocrypha has all three of the books we are discussing today. Okay, close this out. Now we're in the Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition. Okay, as you can see, Tobit 1 is here. I'm going to click on the Bible book list again. We're going to scroll down. You can see there's Old Testament and New Testament columns. As you can see right here under Old Testament, there's Tobit, there's Judith, 1 and 2 Mac. But if you look out through this whole list, you're not going to find the prayer. Okay, the prayer is not in this translation. Now we're in the New American Bible Revised Edition. Okay, NABRE. Again, you can see it has Tobit. Click on this book list, and just like the previous one, you can see Tobit right here. You can see Judith, 1 and 2 Mac. Okay, you got Wisdom and Sirach, but you're not going to find the prayer. Okay. And the same thing is for this one here. Okay, the New Catholic Bible. You see it has Tobit, but just like the other ones we saw, it's not going to list the prayer. You got Tobit, Judith, 1 and 2 Mac, okay, Wisdom and Sirach, but no prayer. Okay, so that's all really I want to show you. So if you have internet access, you can go to BibleGateway.com and you can search up these translations, the RSV, okay, And in the book list for the RSV, under the Apocrypha section, it has Tobit Judith and the Prayer and all these other books. Okay? So go to the RSV, BibleGateway.com. If you don't have the Apocrypha, you can read them there. Okay? Let me jump back over. Let me minimize this. Okay, so what do we see here? This is a quick review of what we just saw. The King James, all three are not included. All three of these, Tobit, Judith, and Manasseh, not included. GNT is segregated. It contains only 7 Apocrypha books, including Tobit and Judith, but not the Prayer of Manasseh. RSV, it's segregated 18 Apocrypha books, including Tobit, Judith, and the Prayer. RSVCE, NABRE, and NCB, Tobit and Judith are interspersed within the so-called Old Testament books. However, the Prayer of Manasseh is not included. Once again, this is not a complete list. These are just some examples. Note, most of the following information that I will present for the remainder of this discussion will come from one or more of the sources listed on our source slides in the administrative section of this video. Again, we give little opinions. Most of this will come from sources. The Book of Tobit. Information and timeline. The Book of Tobit is also known as just Tobit, also known as the Book of the Words of Tobit. Book of Tobit description. This book is not included in the Protestant or Jewish canons, but it is canonical in the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches. The Anglican Church and some other communions also recognize Tobit as scripture for the purpose of edification, but not for doctrine. Some claim the narrative is based upon a real occurrence preserved by tradition, but poetically embellished to suit the spirit of the time in which it was written. This book had a wide circulation in its Greek form, and the Septuagint version was received as canonical in the Greek Church. Demonstrates the spirit of a Pharisee. Tobit prides himself on not having violated his ceremonial purity by eating the bread of the Gentiles, giving tithes, praying, fasting. Intermarriage with the Gentiles is condemned, advocates marriage within the nation, and strongly encourages marriage between kinfolk. Displays compassion for others by the burial of the bodies of his slain fellow countrymen, and by almsgiving. Tobit ascribed to almsgiving the power to win favor with the Most High and to purge away sin, and thus gave support to the doctrine of salvation by works. Recall, all of this information I just read comes from multiple sources. The story. Tobit was a devout Jew and loyal to the law from his youth. Tobit was carried away captive from his native home in Naphtali in Galilee to Nineveh. While in captivity, he continued his good deeds among those of his own race, and was zealous in honoring the dead by burying those of his kindred who had been the victims of the current king. One night Tobit slept outside in the courtyard, but as he slept, the droppings of a sparrow fell and settled onto his eyes and blinded him for 4 years. Other main characters in the Book of Tobit include Sarah, the daughter of Raguel. Sarah had 7 husbands, but everyone had died when they entered into the bridal chamber. Both Sarah's prayer for a husband and Tobit's prayer for his sight were heard by God, and the angel Raphael was sent to help both of them. Eventually, Tobias, son of Tobit, met up with Raguel, the father of Sarah, and he gave Sarah to Tobias to be his wife. Tobias was probably a little nervous, knowing that 7 of her previous would-be husbands died on day 1. Okay, Sarah's marriage situation and Tobit's eyes were both healed by using the inward parts of a fish. Okay, again, all of this information came from multiple sources. And this was just a high-level overview of the story of Tobit. I encourage everyone to read this book. Languages. The full form of the book is preserved mainly in Greek and Latin versions, but also in various derivative versions: Arabic, Armenian, Coptic, Ethiopic, and Syriac. Early versions include the Old Latin, of which there are 3 types of text. You got the Vulgate, the Syriac versions, the Aramaic, 2 late Hebrew versions, and the Ethiopic. It is extremely probable that the book was originally written in Hebrew, and the Greek title seems to represent Hebrew. Some scholars believe Aramaic was the original language. The only external evidence is supplied by Origen and Jerome, and, on the whole, leaves the question quite open regarding the original language. If Tobit was written around 200 BC, it is far more likely that it would be written in Aramaic rather than Hebrew, especially if it were written in Egypt. If written in Palestine, then Hebrew must be considered, since Hebrew remained the language that was sacred to them. Greek, on the other hand, was making headway throughout this time, particularly in Egypt, so we cannot omit Greek as the original language. Author. The author of this book is unknown and was not a Palestinian Jew. The author appears to be a devout Jew. The characters of this book and geographical setting belong to the diaspora. His readers are in exile, and so is the author. There seems to be plenty of evidence that the author lived in Egypt. One source noted that Tobit, from the northern kingdom, is worshiping at the temple in Jerusalem, observing the feast. You can find that in Tobit 1, 4-7. Maybe this author was from the southern kingdom and glorifying how a northern kingdom Israelite was worshiping at the southern kingdom temple and city. Okay?
That's something to think about.
Date written. Note, there are quite a few scholarly comments on a possible date, so bear with me a moment. One scholar claims the church, up to the time of the Reformation, 1500s, believed that Tobit himself wrote this book around 600 BC, as far as chapter 14, and that chapter 14, 1-11, was written by his son Tobias, and that 14, 12-15 was added by the editor after the death of Tobias. Another scholar claims that some of it was written by Tobit in Assyria, 689 BC. Other parts were written in Palestine, approximately 280 BC. And from these 2 Hebrew documents, the Chaldee version was made about 120 BC. Others claim that the book was compiled after the Babylonian captivity and after the destruction of the temple due to references of the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem. Find that in Tobit, chapter 13, verses 10 and 16, chapter 14, verse 4. The writer's knowledge of the latest portions of the Pentateuch show that he must have lived during the Greek period. This will bring the date of the book down to a time later than 300 BC. Most convincing indication as to the date is the writer's religious standpoint, especially the stress on praying, fasting, and effectiveness of almsgiving, etc. This points toward the end of the 3rd century BC. Some claim the book must have been written before the building of Herod's temple started around 20 BC, for it is evident that in Tobit 14 and 5, he was familiar with the second temple, not the upgraded temple. There is nothing in this book which suggests that it was written during the Maccabean era, approximately 175 to 125 BC. It must therefore have been written either before or after. One source claims that the book is certainly pre-Maccabean, 167 to 37 BC. The absence of any awareness of the Maccabean revolt supports this claim. Okay, I added this. Notice that the dates are different in these 2 points. This person calls the Maccabean era 175 to 125. This person says 167 to 37. Okay, people have different opinions. Scholars don't even agree. Because the writer does not represent the Pharisaic viewpoint, we are forced to assume a date before 175 BC, the end of the 3rd century BC. Tobit's dependence upon Sirach cannot be dismissed. If dependence upon the Greek of Sirach were properly substantiated, it might seriously complicate or facilitate the solution of the date of Tobit's composition. The evidence in favor of the pre-Maccabean date would not be weakened regarding possible misreadings, not of the Greek translation of Sirach, about 132 BC, but of the Hebrew original, approximately 190 to 180 BC. Tobit must then have been written between 190 to 170 BC, according to some scholars. Again, all of these statements that we just read, these are opinions of scholars. Historical setting. Tobit was carried away captive from his native home in Naphtali in Galilee to Nineveh during the reign of Shalmaneser in 721 BC. Tobit was young, married, and had a son before he was taken captive. That's Tobit 1, 9 to 10. According to Tobit 14, 1 and 2 G&T, Tobit died at 112 years old. A casual internet search shows a few Bibles claiming Tobit's death at 112. One of my sources claims Tobit died at 158 years old. ChatGPT truly believes Tobit died at 158 years old. NABRE, the translation, says Tobit was 58 when he lost his sight. G&T translation says he was 62. Okay, I said all that to say this. Sources simply do not agree. And this is a good example of not believing something just because it is written in someone's favorite translation of the Bible. Okay, some things require research, not just reading. Okay. Recall that this orange time bar right here shows the approximate date range of most of the historical settings within the current Protestant Apocrypha. So, where does the story of Tobit fit in historically in this orange bar? Okay. Historical setting. Tobit was carried away captive from his native home in Naphtali in Galilee to Nineveh during the reign of Shalmaneser in 721 BC. Okay, so that's here. Here's 700, so 721, so after that. Tobit was young, married, and had a son before captivity. Tobit died at the age of 112 or 158. So approximately the historical setting could be here if he lived to be, if this setting is 100 years old. He lived past 100, but he was captive after he was married and had a son. Okay? Let's continue. Possibly written during the Greek period, a time later than 300 BC. Some claim parts were written in Palestine, 280 BC. Okay, here's your 200 marker. 300 is about right here in the middle, so 300 to 200 here. Others say towards the end of the 3rd century BC, so 225, 210 BC. So possibly written right here. Also, it was written before the building of Herod's temple in 20 BC. So Herod started building here and finished about 18 BC. So it had to be written before this. Pre-Maccabean or Hasmonean period. Tobit may have been written between 190 to 170 BC. I am leaning toward this time frame, in my opinion. Okay? If Tobit and Tobias wrote any part of this book back in the 600s, then it would be over here that it was written. So, was it originally written here? Or was it written here like a lot of things? Maybe oral tradition? Don't know. But I'm leaning toward this era, actually toward more the Maccabean. I'll explain that in a second. Pause if needed. The Book of Judith. Information and timeline. It's also known as just Judith, also known as the Blessed Judith. Book of Judith. Description. Judith is considered canonical in Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches as part of the Apocrypha by Protestants. Judith means Jewish woman and is the feminine form of Yehudi and suggests that she represents the heroic spirit of the Jewish people. The Book of Judith falls in two parts. The introduction, describing the war, chapters 1 to 7. The story of Judith, chapters 8 to 16. The theology of the book strongly pertains to the Pharisee ideology. The story is intended for edification, to encourage the people in time of trial, to point out the true way to deliverance, showing Israel's troubles are due to sin, salvation comes through trust in God and obedience to Him, and that God uses the weak things to confound the strong. Also, obedience to God, which is righteousness, involves the strict observance of the law, including the observance of Sabbaths, feast days, diet, offerings, and sacrifices. Indicates that Israel is God's chosen nation. Obviously. Some consider Judith a historical novel similar to the stories of Ruth, Esther, Daniel, and especially with the book of Tobit. Should be regarded as fiction due to some errors, which include Nebuchadnezzar as ruler of Assyria rather than Babylon, his capital as Nineveh, which had been destroyed by the Babylonians in 612 BC, before he ascended to the throne in 605 BC. Some scholars believe the fictional characters in Judith represent non-fictional people during a later time, from Artaxerxes and Holofernes around 350 BC to the Maccabean period around 120 BC. The story. This book starts with a war between Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over Assyrians in the city of Nineveh, and Arphaxad, who ruled over the Medes. Nebuchadnezzar is victorious. Nebuchadnezzar sends Holofernes, the chief captain, to punish the nations that refused to support him. The Israelites are filled with fear and ask the Most High for protection. Holofernes is informed that it is useless to attack Israel if God defends them. This news makes Holofernes angry, cuts off the water supply to Bethulia, and camps around it, hoping famine forces an Israelite surrender. Judith hears of this situation and rebukes the elders of the city, reminding them of what the Most High has done for them in the past. Judith claims the Most High will use her to deliver them within 5 days. Judith goes into enemy camp, subsequently invited into the tent of Holofernes, and tricks him with persuasive but deceptive words. After a feast, Judith is left alone with Holofernes, who was overcome with wine. Laying on his bed, Judith then used his sword and severs his head. Judith and her maid flee from the enemy camp. Judith is received with joy. The Assyrians panic and flee, and they are overcome by the Israelites. If you have never read this story regarding Judith, I encourage you to do so. Languages. It is generally recognized that Semitic or Hebrew, not Aramaic, was the original language. The Hebrew original is described as being lost. The earliest form we have is the Greek translation, the only primary version existing. Jerome knew of the existence of the original Hebrew, but he was unable to obtain a copy for himself. Some argue that Jerome used an Aramaic source. There is no doubt Judith was originally written in Hebrew as soon as the attempt is made to retranslate the Greek into Hebrew. There are many mistakes in the Greek which are at once explained in the light of what the corresponding Hebrew must have read. The translation is so literal that it can be put back into Hebrew with ease. The Greek version is made directly from the original Hebrew. The Old Latin version is made from the Greek. The Syriac version is aligned with the Old Latin. Author. There can be no doubt that Judith belongs to the family of Esther. The work is a consistent whole and, with the possible exception of the song, shows no sign of being authored by more than one person. The author is anonymous. From his writing in Hebrew and from his detailed reference to the geography of the Holy Land, it may be inferred that he was a Palestinian Jew. The author, beyond question, lived and wrote in Palestine. He was a Jew, not a Samaritan, and probably dwelt near Shechem, which some claim to be the city Bethulia mentioned in this book. From his theological views, it seems that he belonged to the Pharisaic party. The author apparently knew some of the latest of the Old Testament books, Esther and Daniel. Date written. The fact that the book is not mentioned by Josephus or Philo or in the New Testament proves nothing. Josephus does not refer to Job, besides other books, and Philo does not notice any of the Apocrypha. The earliest reference to the book, and no doubt to the Greek version of it, is by Clement of Rome about 90 AD. Author was probably a Palestinian Jew who wrote during the strenuous years following the Maccabean revolt, perhaps around 150 BC. There are certain historical conditions that point to the Maccabean period and to sometime during the years of Jonathan's leadership, 160 to 141 BC. The Jews were enjoying virtual independence, and at the same time, the Syrian menace was by no means over. Both from a political and religious viewpoint, the conditions presented in Judith are parallel with those of the Maccabean era. One scholar dates the book as late as 104 BC. Note regarding the highlighted text up here. I believe that many writings were created around this time for this very reason, this independence that they were feeling. I believe the Israelites experienced more freedom of expression and therefore documented possible oral traditions into written form while not fearing a backlash from the other nations when they were under their occupation. This is my opinion. Historical setting. Judith 1:1 RSV says, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians in the great city of Nineveh. Nebuchadnezzar reigned over the Neo-Babylonian Empire, not the Assyrian Empire, from 605 to 562 BC. Destruction of Nineveh was 612 BC. End of Assyrian Empire was 609 BC. Judith 4:3 RSV says, for they had only recently returned from the captivity, and all the people of Judea were newly gathered together. This would possibly place the story of Judith after 538 BC. Judith 16:10 RSV says, the Persians trembled at her boldness, the Medes were daunted at her daring. This does not mention the Assyrians. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to be ruling over the Assyrians. One source states the limits of the range of time within which Judith has been placed are 784 BC to 117 AD. This is only possible with the use of pseudonyms or pseudonames, where you take the names and places of people and insert them into different times in history. Okay? Placing Judith within the timeline is challenging due to the potential historical discrepancies or inaccuracies. Okay, once again, this orange bar represents the approximate timelines for the historical settings of all the Protestant Apocrypha stories. So, where does the story of Judith fit in historically? I want to get this one claim out the way first. Okay, we just saw how one source stated the limits of the timeline range for Judith is from 784 to 117. Okay, so this is only possible with pseudonyms, aka pseudonames. Okay, however, the historical setting is more likely after the start of the Babylonian captivity, in my opinion. I am only showing 600 to 500 BC right now, okay? So Nebuchadnezzar ruled from 605 to 562 BC. Okay, so that's about approximately here to here, okay? Judith 1:1 says Nebuchadnezzar was in his 12th year. He ruled from 605 to 562. Therefore, 593 BC is possibly when the story starts. Okay, and it appears that the temple is still standing in the story of Judith. So that would put him beginning of 593 to before the temple was destroyed. So maybe the story historically sits right here. Okay. Judith 1:1 continues to say that Nebuchadnezzar's was ruling in the city of Nineveh. However, Nineveh was destroyed in 612 BC before he started his reign. So if he's supposed to be reigning here, 12 years later is here, he's ruling in Nineveh, but Nineveh was destroyed back here. Okay, so that's what some scholars are pointing out. Is there another Nineveh? Don't know, but the one we all seem to know about was destroyed. Okay, Judith 4:3 says, "For they had only recently returned from the captivity, and all the people of Judea were newly gathered together." According to one source, this would place the story after 538 BC. Okay, as you can see, this would place the story of Judah after the reign of Nebuchadnezzar and after the Babylonian captivity. Here's Nebuchadnezzar. Here's the rest of the Babylonian captivity. Here's 537, 535. The Cyrus decree said, Southern Kingdom, you all go build your temple again. 538. So actually after 538. So after this time, basically. Okay, so that's what it's trying to say. In addition, Judah 16:10 mentions the Persians and not the Assyrians. Persian captivity right here. Okay, this would also suggest a historical setting after 538 BC. Recall that not all of the Southern Kingdom Israelites went to go work on the temple. Okay, so they all weren't down here feeling free. Okay, some of them were. So when was the story of Judith written? Okay, so I squeezed back this stuff back here. So as you can see, it goes from 800 to 0 again. So this is when, after 12 years, Nebuchadnezzar, you got your story historically set right here. Okay, just after the 600 mark here. And this is 538 after the Cyrus stuff right here. So now, when was the story written? The earliest reference to the Greek version of the book is by Clement of Rome about 90 AD. That obviously means it had to be written sometime before this date. So here you go. Temple destroyed, 70, about 90. It's referenced by Clement. Okay. probably a Palestinian Jew who wrote during the years following the Maccabean revolt, influenced by Jonathan's leadership. The Jews were enjoying virtual independence, and one of the scholars said as late as 104. So it could have been written between, you got the revolt starting here, you got the Hasmonean time frame, and here's 100. So it looked like it's probably written during this time, which I personally believe a lot of stuff was probably written during this time, in my opinion. The Prayer of Manasseh. Information and timeline. Also known as the Prayer of Manasseh. Also known as the Prayer of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah. Also known as the Prayer of Manasseh, king of the Jews. Also known as the Prayer of Manasseh, king of Judah, when he was held captive in Babylon. Okay, the Prayer of Manasseh is in the current Protestant Apocrypha book. Okay, this book that I showed you, it's actually in here. Okay, you will not find this prayer included and or interspersed in many other Bibles. However, you will find it in a few Bibles like the Britain Septuagint translation and the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Okay, I want to show you this right here. I just happened to buy one right here. This thing is huge. I don't know how you can tell. Look at my hand and look how thick this book is. Okay, this is a thick book. If you're into lifting weights, you don't need them, just use this book. Okay, just use this book. Put this back over here. Okay, this is a large print Bible. I bought my copy of the Negro Slave Bible from the same publishing company, Fifth Estate Publishing, aka Joseph Lumpkin. Okay, again, in short, the prayer is not available in most Bibles. Even in Bibles where you find Tobit and Judith, you may not find the prayer. That's what I showed you when I went to BibleGateway.com. Prayer of Manasseh. Description. Two main ideas of the prayer are the infinite compassion of the Most High, and two, the effectiveness of true repentance. Contains 1 chapter and 15 verses in the Revised Standard Version, RSV. In my hard copy of the Apocrypha, it does not have a chapter number or any verses, okay? So in my copy, this actual copy right here, it doesn't have a chapter number. It doesn't say chapter 1, and it doesn't have verses. Although the prayer is typically included in editions of the Apocrypha, only Eastern Orthodox churches consider it authoritative. The original prayer must have been lost, and the Greek prayer is, most probably, the attempt of some religious Jew of later times to reproduce it. This is a prayer to the Most High acknowledging His works of creation, His power, glory, and mercy. It includes a confession of sins, prayer for pardon, and finally an expression of praise. The name Manasseh is never mentioned in the prayer. During this prayer, Manasseh was king of Judah. You find that 2 Kings 21, 2 Chronicles 33. Taken into captivity by the Assyrians to the city of Babylon, which was under Assyrian rule, that's 2 Chronicles 33 and 11. Some believe that it is obviously uttered by Manasseh when it is compared with what is said in 2 Chronicles 33 and 19. Therefore, some scholars believe this prayer should be added after 2 Chronicles 33 and 13. Let's look at these two verses. Okay, 2 Chronicles 33, 13, KJV. And prayed unto him, and he was entreated of him, and heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem unto his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord, he was God. Verse 19. And this prayer also, and how God was entreated of him, and all his sins, and his trespass, and the places wherein he built high places, and set up groves and graven images, before he was humbled, behold, they are written among the sayings of the seers. I want to just add this in there. this Manasseh seemed like he was pretty bad. Okay? I'll leave it at that. He was pretty bad. Again, some scholars believe this prayer should be added after verse 13, right here. And again, some believe that the prayer was recited by Manasseh when compared to what is said in verse 19. Languages. If the date the text was actually written is in the middle of the 2nd century BC, then we should expect the prayer to have been originally written either in Aramaic or Hebrew. Some strongly believe in a Hebrew original. However, the majority of scholars favor a Greek original. Whether it was composed in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek is disputed. One source claims that it seems most probable that the prayer was originally written in Greek, and that the existing Greek text is not a translation from Hebrew or Aramaic. The flexible style and ample vocabulary favors the view that Greek is the language in which it was composed. The employment of phrases based on or derived from the Septuagint seems to indicate an acquaintance with the Greek version rather than the work of an independent translator. This prayer is not contained in any Greek manuscript of 2nd Chronicles, where some say we should expect to find it. A few Syriac manuscripts append the prayer to 2nd Chronicles. Prayer does not appear in most of the printed editions of the Septuagint. The text is preserved only in Christian sources, including the Odes, a collection of hymns and prayers that forms an appendix to the book of Psalms in the 3 Greek biblical manuscripts. Also preserved in some church handbooks. Appears that the prayer is in use, just not in many Bibles, in my opinion. Author. Whether the prayer is a Jewish or a Christian composition is disputed. The prayer's confirmation and documented usage are exclusively Christian, and it could have been composed by a Christian familiar with the Septuagint and other post-biblical Jewish traditions. Other sources claim the writer was, without a doubt, a Jew and possibly an Alexandrian Jew. The references to the patriarchs and their sinlessness, the forms of expression, and the general mode of thought stamp it as Jewish. If original text was Greek, then the author is most likely a Hellenistic Jew. Date written. The date of composition of the prayer is difficult to decide. The books of the Chronicles belong to about 300 BC, while the prayer itself occurs for the first time in literature in the Didascalia Apostolorum circa 200 to 250 AD, and in the 4th century Greek work, the Apostolic Constitutions. One scholar dates the prayer in the 4th or 5th century AD because its author is the same as that of the Apostolic Constitutions, which has that date. Okay, I added this. Can't be true if the previous bullet is true. So if it's referenced or occurred the first time in the Didascalia around 200-250, well then it couldn't be the first time down here in the 4th or 5th century, 300 or 400s. Scholars don't agree. Most likely written around the turn of the Common Era. The prayer's parallels to the Greek Septuagint may indicate a date in or after the 1st century BCE. Some think it may have been composed like other Apocrypha literary material during the Maccabean period. The date of composition may be the middle of the 2nd century BC. One source made this observation regarding 2 Chronicles 33 and 18. 2 Chronicles 33:18 KJV. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh and his prayer unto his God, and the words of the seers that spake to him in the name of the Lord God of Israel, behold, They are written in the book of the kings of Israel. Okay, one source pointed out that this prayer was in existence when the Chronicles were compiled, and that the compiler saw it in the book of the kings of Israel. Okay, that dates the prayer to be the same as the book of Chronicles. And recall that one source said that the second Chronicles dated about 300 BC. Okay, so that dates the prayer to about 300 BC.
That's something to think about.
Okay, something to think about. Historical setting. Since this Manasseh is supposed to be the one in 2 Chronicles 33, then that would place it around 687 BC. Again, we use the Bible Hub timeline as our main timeline reference tool. And the Bible Hub timeline says 2 Chronicles 33 is around 687 BC. Once again, this orange bar, approximate time frame for all of the Apocrypha, the Protestant Apocrypha. Okay, so where does the prayer fit in historically? Since this Manasseh is supposed to be the one in 2 Chronicles 33, then that would place the historical setting around 687 BC according to the Bible Hub timeline. Okay, right here. So here's 600, at about 700, so just after 700 roughly is this area right here. Now, when was the prayer, actually written? The prayer itself occurs for the first time in the Didascalia Apostolorum around 200 to 250 AD. That would be off to the right of this timeline, okay? And would obviously had to have existed before 200 AD if that was true. Most likely written around the turn of the century of the Common Era, okay? Right before then. The prayers parallel to the Greek Septuagint may indicate a date after the 1st century BC. So here's the 1st century BC right here. So some say maybe right after. I'm still leaning to the left side, okay? Some think it may have been composed like other material during the Maccabean period. Again, the Maccabean period seems to show up in quite a bit of the timelines that I've done. Okay, the date of composition may be the middle of the 2nd century BC. So here's the 1st century, 2nd century is right here from 100 to 200. Well, if it's the middle of that, it's right around the beginning of the revolt of the Maccabean period. Okay, like I've mentioned before, I'm leaning towards the Maccabean period as a time frame when a lot of writings were actually written due to the freedoms that they may have existed during that time. Okay, they may have been a little more free during the Hasmonean time to document things and not feel, some blowback. Summary. Most of the information presented today came from one or more of the sources listed on our source slides in the administrative section of this video. We presented very little of our own personal opinion in this entire video. We presented detailed information on Tobit, Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. Here's a summary for each book. Summary: Tobit. Tobit was considered canon in the councils of Carthage 397, Florence 1439, and Trent 1546. In the history of Christianity, the influence of the Book of Tobit has been felt in wedding ceremonies. Tobias and Sarah gave the first 3 nights after their marriage to prayer, postponing their wedlock until the 4th night. Vulgate 6, 21 and 22. During the Middle Ages, this example of Tobias and Sarah was considered to be the ideal for Christians and was followed, for example, in the marriage of Louis IX of France and his queen in 1234. In England, the pre-Reformation order of matrimony, which was adopted in 1805 for the use in Diocese of Salisbury, and by the middle of the 13th century was used throughout Britain, mentions Tobias and Sarah as a model pair, and keeping the bed free from the demons who murdered Sarah's husbands. The marriage service in the Book of Common Prayer, 1549, first edition, contains a prayer of Raphael, the angel who was sent to comfort Tobias and Sarah. In the United States, the Old Order Amish have made this book the basis of the wedding sermon. Summary: Judith. Judith was also considered canon in the Councils of Carthage 397, Florence 1439, and Trent 1546. The purpose of the story is to show how the Most High protects his own people against their enemies. The instrument whereby his will is revealed may be weak in many ways, provided there is genuine trust in him and provided that the laws of the Most High are observed. The instrument of choice in this story was Judith. Judith is represented as one who is never lacking in religious duties. Clement of Rome speaks of Judith and Esther as examples of women who were strengthened through the grace of God to perform many a manly deed. In subsequent centuries, Judith and her deed of prowess were celebrated by literally hundreds of poets, painters, and dramatists. Historical issues regarding Judith. In Judith 1:1, it says, "In the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians in the great city of Nineveh." However, Nineveh was destroyed in 612 BC. The end of the Assyrian Empire was 609 BC, and Nebuchadnezzar reigned over the Neo-Babylonian Empire from 605 to 562 BC. He was king of Babylon, not Assyria. Source: McClintock and Strong Biblical Cyclopedia. Entry: Judith, Book of, Section 4, Historical Character of the Book. In there, you will see it contains a list of many historical issues regarding the story of Judith. Okay?
That's something to think about.
We cannot ignore these historical discrepancies and/or inaccuracies when discussing the legitimacy of Judith or any other document for that matter. Summary: Prayer of Manasseh. Despite the inherent worth of this ancient prayer, it seems the biggest issue was its placement within the biblical canon and/or the Apocrypha. The position of the prayer in biblical manuscripts and in printed Bibles varies considerably. It appears that no Greek manuscript of the Old Testament contains this prayer in connection with 2 Chronicles. In several manuscripts, the prayer is appended to the Book of Psalms. Beginning with the Middle Ages, manuscripts of the Latin Vulgate put the prayer at the end of 2 Chronicles. A few Syriac, Armenian, Old Slavonic, and Ethiopic manuscripts include the prayer, some at the end of 2 Chronicles, some at the end of Psalms. Luther eventually placed the prayer at the close of the Apocrypha. Among many English Bibles, the prayer is usually placed among the Apocrypha before 1 Maccabees. Some place it in an appendix after 2 Maccabees. In all official printings of the Vulgate since the Council of Trent, it is placed in an appendix after the New Testament. Okay? In my copy of the 50-pound Britain Septuagint Bible, the prayer is actually Psalm 152. Okay, Psalm 152. It is called the Prayer of Manasseh. Closing remarks.
What do you think?
Before we close out this discussion, we have a few more questions. What is your opinion on Tobit and Judith after hearing this discussion? Should the Prayer of Manasseh be inserted after 2 Chronicles 33 and 13? How do you feel about Nebuchadnezzar ruling in Nineveh, a city scholars claim was destroyed before he started ruling? Please put your answers in the comment section of this video, or you can send us an email. Please check the description box of this channel for that email, or we always try to have our email in the description text of all of our video discussions. Once again, we thank you for your feedback. Purpose. Once again, the purpose of these timeline videos is to simply provide some detailed information on each apocryphal book to get a historical perspective on what each book is about, and eventually discuss how they fit or do not fit into the canon. Research.
Remember, do your own research.
The views contained in this video were our personal opinions and our interpretations of sources used and were not meant to dictate doctrine. We recommend to everyone, do your own research. We plan to list all of our sources that we use in all of our discussion videos. We are citing the sources and, when appropriate, providing page numbers so you can trust but verify. We encourage everyone, read as much as you can. There is a lot of historical Israelite literature out there for all of us to access, especially if you consider yourself an Israelite. Please research. We admit some material is hard to find. This concludes today's discussion on Apocrypha, chronology, and composition, specifically the book of Tobit, the book of Judith, and the Prayer of Manasseh. #Apocrypha Timeline. We want to thank you for watching this episode of Something to Think About. I am Brother Mitch. My brother is Brother Mike. We are the brothers. We are disciples of Yahawashi. I want to say Shalom and Shalom Israel. Goodbye, Christians. All right, to everyone else. Till next time.
Follow the brothers.
On YouTube,
Hebrew Connect TV.
X,
Fanbase.
Rumble. Or visit their website.
See also Facebook, Gab, and Truth.
The following is an HBO special featuring the brothers.
Yo, can you help the brothers out?
HBO special.
you can use PayPal.
The brothers need some digital money.
Or you can use CashApp.
Every little bit helps.
Please support their efforts.
You can even use a credit card.
And Venmo.
Why are you selling cookies?
Please help support this organization.
It's okay if you can't give. Just spread the word.
That's just as important as giving.
pressure.